Good evening, everyone. It's now 6:02, and I will call to order the meeting of the April 13th, 2026 Long Range Financial Planning Committee. I will now grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record and to also live stream this evening's meeting. Laura, if you could help out with the roll call, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ellen? Here. Eric isn't coming. Mary Ann?
Here.
Mary Ellen?
Here.
Maya?
Here.
Nancy Hyde?
Here.
Nancy James?
Here.
Phil?
Here.
Connor?
Here.
Is Lana coming?
Well, she's not able to be here this evening.
Nora?
Here.
And Pat, I believe, is coming. And Tim is here.
Here.
So we're all set.
Thanks, Laura. So we'll start with the chair's update. We just have a very brief update this evening. So the first item on the chair's update is that the statement of interest to the MSBA will be submitted at the end of this week. Okay. The next update, I believe after we met in February, the FS1, the floor was deemed structurally unsound. So the temporary structure is now, looks near completion. So that's helpful to us. We can restore our operations to this side of town. Everyone was currently the entire department was working out of Islington. So that is some progress, and we're looking forward to, or looking ahead to the May town meeting, where there's a warrant article for feasibility funding for 3 sites at this point. So Phil, do you have anything else for the chair's update?
No.
Okay. Okay, so moving into the first agenda item, and that's the discussion of the integrated facilities plan. So we've discussed at prior meetings that the facility study is very comprehensive, and I think what has been a challenge is how to break that down into a document that we can share with the town and really engage the town. A number of people have been asking for what's ahead, what's next, what's in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And as we have talked about in prior meetings, it does get a little tricky when you're looking, from that 10 to 20 year range, and that's always changeable, as Maya knows, with schools, as we've talked about. So has everyone had an opportunity to review the document that Laura sent out, the support for us as part of long range? Okay, I don't know, Connor, if you want to speak to that at all? Or?
Sure, thanks, Nancy. So it's good to see everyone in person. This is my first in-person long-range financial planning committee meeting. After the meeting in February, I had met with Phil and Nancy, both as part of what I view as my due diligence of getting up to speed as town administrator in Westwood, but also with a particular interest to the work that this committee has been doing recently, where you've been kind of handed the mantle of, we have, multiple hundred pages of technical analysis from Doran Whittier as far as the many deficits and needs of the town and school facilities. That's a very good baseline. It's very good that Westwood has that. But as Nancy has alluded to, and I've certainly heard it at functionally every public event I've done since I started here, which is a good thing, the community is looking to the town and school leadership with a general what's the plan question, right? And not only what is the plan for FS1 or Thurston, which are looming kind of large and kind of at our doorstep, but what's the 10 and 20 year plan for all of these buildings in a way that hopefully is well thought out, driven by, not just capital needs, but working with citizens and doing so publicly and transparently. And are there ways that we can get creative with the sequencing or financing or planning of these properties so that we don't want to mislead folks that there's going to be a cheap, fast, and easy way to get through hundreds of millions of dollars of potential building needs, but are there ways that we could do so where these projects are complementing one another rather than viewed as kind of sandbagging one another? And so speaking with Phil and Nancy and kind of drawing on some of my prior work, wanted to come up with some support for the long range financial planning committee, because as I think noble as it is that you were all willing to wade into that field, you have jobs and lives, right? You are a volunteer committee, and I always kind of view it as a role of staff, not to overstep our bounds, but to provide the tools and resources, ideally, to take what your mission is and help get you there. So went to the select board earlier this winter, I believe, and requested and appreciated receiving a transfer from a board's reserve fund for building needs related work, both for FS1 for the kind of more immediate needs, doing some pre-feasibility analysis on the 2 sites that are being considered behind Starbucks and Deerfield, but also broad enough in a request for other municipal or public building needs, so that we had some capacity here for a project like this. And what I'm proposing would be for the town to issue basically an RFP, and this is something that Superintendent Pavovar and I have looked at and worked on together, and I'll come back to that because that's really important, I think, for this team, but also, I don't know how high your viewership is, but I think it's always worth highlighting that we all recognize that, you know, we have FS1, we have Thurston, these are not kind of town and school projects, these are all Westwood projects, right? And if we want, in my view, if we want to build a successful 10 and 20-year capital program, it's not going to be very likely to succeed if it's viewed as anything but a kind of collective program. So I want to issue an RFP to bring on some strategic planning and capital planning services that would work with town and school administration, but also really with this board to help put together a strategic multi-decade plan for all of our facilities, to hold some community planning workshops. I like to steal from the planning field. I would say that even if planning board member weren't here, do things like charrettes, get people to come in, participate in conversations. What are things that excite them? What are things that worry them? What are the things that matter to them? What are the things that they think maybe we're overshooting and we are putting too much emphasis on, or that are perhaps too costly? So to have a consulting team assist with that kind of work, but also work with us to look at financial tools, right? I think it's important to level set with folks that a lot of these buildings are just of a size that debt exclusions have to be a major source of financing. But I think it's also important that, whether true or not, we don't want to be conducting ourselves in a way that there is a perception that the default is, oh, it's a debt exclusion, just go do the tax increase, right? That there's not other thinking around what are other revenue streams that we may have access to, or other ways that we are currently planning and managing our budgets that we could take a different perspective to and maybe leverage that to float a bond, right, for certain building needs to offset that hit to taxpayers. So really, the goal here would be bring someone on by the end of the year, have a document that takes, I don't want to say backward looking in a pejorative way, it's not, but the Dore and Whittier report looks at what we have today. Here's a list of a lot of challenges we have. And there were some forward-facing kind of desktop level options analysis, like the elevator option for town hall, but to really say, okay, that's the data baseline. Let's bring the community together and understand what are the things that they're hoping to see. Let's do this as a team and put together some options of what the community is hoping to see from a policy and programming standpoint, kind of match that against the deficiencies and talk about what are the financing tools we have available to us to put together something that, you know, we'll put red footnotes that the farther away in the future, the less precise it becomes. But I think the time to do this is now. I think that as we gear up for the third go at FS1, this question will continue to come up. And it's a fair question to ask of, if we're going to do this, what's next? And so this is meant to be a way to get to an answer to that question. So I'm happy to take any feedback from folks if they have comments, concerns, et cetera. But again, I tried to pull the scope together following your meetings before I was here, and based on conversations with Phil and Nancy, and try to do something good to help this team.
Connor, I'm just curious as to how you see this lining up with what this committee does, because as you're walking through this, I'm not sure exactly what we could do. I mean, it seems to me like what we would be doing would be helping facilitate what these folks are doing, help with the community engagement part of it, being a forum to discuss some of the things that they're looking at and the conclusions that they come to. But it doesn't seem to me that we should be doing, just going along and doing what we do every month without having, before they do their thing. I mean, it seems as though, would you see us maybe taking a 2 or 3 month time out in these meetings until they sort of catch up? And because I'm not sure what we would do before they engage.
So that's a good question. First, I'm the most inexperienced person on this committee as a member of the committee, so I don't want to say you have no other mission outside of this, right? That's not my place. From a timing perspective, assuming that the feedback tonight is positive on this, procurement is looking to put an RFP out imminently, and if that's the case, I would like to have a consultant hired and brought before this committee by mid-May, if not late May at the latest. So even if you're only meeting monthly, hopefully we're pretty close to having somebody to do exactly that, Phil, and have that kickoff and discussion. As far as the value add, I think that this committee and your collective experience brings, but also the boards you represent, depending on where this project goes, ideally this doesn't just turn into a plan that sits on a shelf. Right, and if it's going to not sit on a shelf, then it will need the buy-in of the school committee, of the select board, of the planning board, of our finance boards, and I think that's, to me, as a kind of outsider looking in, that's what I see when I look at your team and this committee. I think that you could have a lot of really important institutional knowledge and expertise to offer this consulting team coming in, where if you notice in the scope, I may have even been explicit, I don't think that Westwood's administrative staff, the school's administrative staff, or the citizen volunteers on these boards lack the expertise to be creative with financial tools, right? So I'm not necessarily putting the heaviest emphasis in this scope on a finance firm to come in. This is really more about community engagement and capital planning. I do think that this committee will have a very important role in discussing, especially where if we're going to be having conversations that I think, frankly, we need to as a community around funding for some of these larger projects within the levy, there will be ramifications for those decisions on town and school operating capacity in the future. And so again, and I would look to you and Nancy to tell me if I'm off base here, I think this is the committee that makes the most sense to have those conversations.
So we would sort of align our scheduling and agenda to, in a way that would coordinate with what the consultant's doing, so that at the end of the day, there's a report that is generated by the consultant, but has input from this group and the groups represented here and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm just thinking that so they start in May sometime, and one of the first things they do is meet with this committee. But then they go off and crunch some numbers and get some broader input and so on and so forth. And then they come back here again, or what? I mean, I just think that it seems as though that what we do from here on has to be tied to what they're doing. That we don't have sort of we no longer have a totally separate agenda from what this consultant's doing. It's got to be an agenda that's tied together, or else we end up doing things that aren't taken into account
Sure.
in the report, or they end up doing things that aren't consistent with what the folks are bringing to this table.
I think that's fair feedback, and I guess the way I would think about it, which I think is just saying the same thing differently, is that this project demands kind of the full attention of this board, I would say. I'm a big believer, and I probably shouldn't say this into a microphone, but I don't really think multitasking is real. I think we could focus and do one or two things well, but if we're trying to be the group that takes on the mantle of this project, which if we do it right, I mean, we want this to have real impact on the policy direction of our boards and our community. I think it deserves our full attention. Whereas other things that are very worthwhile, maybe, you know, looking into reviewing certain financial policies, if they don't intersect with this, I would say pick that up later and focus on this.
All right, so, I mean, it just means that obviously we've got to be in close communication
Yes.
about making, to make sure that we're not getting too far ahead of them, they're not getting too far ahead of us, that they're running things through this group to get feedback, and we're not going too far away or trying to duplicate what they're doing.
Yes,
I mean, just-
I think that's reasonable.
I mean, so, in spite of the fact that we have a very good calendar here, it seems to me that maybe what we say is, okay, let's meet, you give us a date, May 17th or 23rd or whatever. We expect we might have somebody picked by then, and, we sit down, roll up our sleeves, say, okay, how long is it gonna take you to do this? What's the order of what you're doing? How much of our time do you need?
Sure.
And then we figure out what we're gonna do for June, July, August, September, whatever.
Yes. That
That
sounds
trying to
reasonable.
figure out when we're gonna meet and what we're gonna talk about before we have that discussion with them seems to be
Cart before the horse.
inappropriate
Sure.
or duplicative or could create a problem.
So I would view them, and tell me if I have this right or wrong, it really is an extension of this committee. So I mean, I think we would need to be in lockstep. And I think when we talk about a resource perspective, I'm not entirely sure it's like a bandwidth issue. I think it's really an expertise issue, right? I think having someone who has done this before and has worked with communities and can really help break this down, I think that would be invaluable to the town. So.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I think I rival Connor as the least inexperienced member of this group.
Oh, that's right.
So I want that to be noted for the record. I'm really pleased to be here. Although I've been watching your meetings for years now, this is the
Riveting
first time.
television, yeah.
Sorry?
Riveting television.
Indeed. This is the first time I've been able to participate, so I'm really pleased to be here. I did participate in long-range financial planning in a previous iteration when I served on FinCom years ago, which is why when I ran for the select board for the first time, I really thought we needed to reinstitute this group so that we can do the long-range planning. And I really want to thank all of you. I know some of you have served for years on this committee, and you've done really important work, particularly with the schools and municipal studies, facilities studies, really laying the groundwork for what is going to come next. And I want to thank Nancy and Phil for chairing this group, and I want to thank Connor for his leadership. He and I began talking about long-range financial planning from the time he was hired and before he even was employed. And as you've heard, the select board did authorize the funds toward this consultant, and I'm really viewing this as the next phase of this work. I think I like your analogy, Nancy. This is an extension of this group where we will have the expertise to bring people together so that we really have a community-driven long-term plan. And I understand that, to my knowledge, Westwood has never had a long-term plan. We've always had a 5-year capital plan, but we've never really had a plan 10 years or so or more into the future. And people are looking for that. Clearly, FS1 is looming large. That has to get done. We have the statement of interest going in on Thurston. That is also a priority. But we want to give folks the context of what is in the long-term plan, and we want to deliver on that. So I think this is a really good step to engage the community in that discussion so we can build consensus around that. So thank you. I'm pleased to be here and to work.
We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
Thank
Can I
you.
ask a question?
Yes.
Can you remind me of what the anticipated spend on this consultant is?
So I would hope that it would be 30,000 or less.
Okay. I think we should be upfront with that,
Yep.
with the community. I think in some ways, this looks like hiring a consultant to review a consultant, which it is. I'm not saying it's not necessary. I think to Mary Ann's point and and to your point, Connor, it is necessary. But I do think we need to make it clear to the community, very clear, what the cost is and what the value is. Because I think cost is particularly a sensitive issue right now. And, I didn't see it in here. I'm not sure if it was pulled out of whatever funds were allocated, so.
Yes, it would be, my expectation is that this would be like operating budget neutral, because it would be funded out of the existing reserve fund allocation the board has already made.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, I think we should make that clear. I mean,
Yep.
nothing is ever budget neutral, right? You make decisions, but I just wanted to make it clear that the community understands what we're spending and what we think the value is in getting it. And as I said, I don't disagree that we need this, but I just think we need to make that clear.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think the value of, I would say it's more than a consultant reviewing consultant's work, right? Because we don't need somebody to do that. They would look at that, but a lot of this is going to be with having the facilitated community outreach workshops and working between the different boards to try to produce something that we all collectively, both here and with our constituent bodies, feel comfortable saying this really reflects the school committee's feelings on this, the select boards, planning boards, and that it passes the straight face test as something that we really actually did publicly with the community.
Yeah.
And I think that the value that it adds is, we've all seen, not to pick on a pain point, but it costs a tremendous amount of money to lose a debt exclusion, right? We've now spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on emergency apparatus shelter, and which dwarfs something like this, and if this can yield a outcome that the community feels represents what they hope to see, then I think that's a good investment. But it's a point well taken.
And I'd just like to clarify, when I say that we lack the expertise, I mean, I'm not a marketer, and that's not from a, just trying to put the best documentation forward. I think that's challenging. Like, we could take the Doran Whittier reports and kind of summarize it and have, my vision was not to have two separate documents, right? So schools and municipal, but to have one document, but to get those key points. I think you really only get one shot at it. So I think it's important to get that.
And is
to
the
get that right.
anticipation that we would have this document, right? We have the deliverable. As we have talked about, this committee has talked about, things shift, buildings shift, right? Is the idea that this group would sort of review this every 5 years, every 10 years? Is what would be, and maybe we don't know that yet, maybe that's for the consultant to tell us, but I think it would be helpful to understand sort of the longevity of this document and how it plays into, to Phil's point, to our role on a going forward basis. It's not just a one and done thing.
Right. Yeah. So great question. No, it's not contemplated in here, but it's pretty common with a board. If you're adopting something, a select board policy, or I'm sure school committee has a schedule of review as well, where we would establish that collectively. But yes, you would want it to be something that has some kind of routine review. And again, where farther out you get, 15, 20-year forecast from now, the world can be in a radically different place from today. If it's going to maintain its usefulness, it will need to be periodically reviewed. So I think establishing what that review cadence is and who's doing it would be a good focus of that work.
Connor, can a document like that or the product that comes out of this be somewhat of a living document where it's not 3 years from now we're going to update it or 18 months from now we're going to update it, but as things progress, we pull things out or things get out of sequence,
Sure. I mean, there's
that it's,
no reason why
we
it
generate
can't.
an update of sorts that isn't maybe formal but allows us to reprioritize.
Sure, I mean, if you could do something like a no less frequently than every 5 years or
Yeah.
something like that. And then if we're extremely fortuitous and win an enormous grant and can do a project ahead of schedule, you do it, you'd issue an addenda and you call it a day, right?
It's been known to happen.
That's,
The library. Can I shift gears and ask a different question? I was just wondering, past meetings, we discussed one way of helping to finance future projects, and that's growing the commercial tax base. And I was just wondering how you guys think we should manage that effort in light of going with an important task, work product to hire a consultant and prioritize our capital needs. Do we put that on the back burner? How do we do that productively for the town? What do we do?
It's a great question, and I wouldn't want us to put it on the back burner, because I think it is critical to start that soon. I don't know, Phil, if everyone else
Yeah,
has
I mean,
thoughts.
it's, Connor and I talked about this a little bit when we met a couple months ago. It's, it's something that's impacting and enabling sort of what this group is dealing with. On the other hand, it's a somewhat different set of, people, skills, and that sort of thing. So it seems a little bit apart from the sort of the heart of what we're trying to do. On the other hand, I'm 100% sure that when we get to the end of the day here in November or December or January, and we have a report and it shows what this is going to cost, that one of the first things everybody's going to say is, well, how do we grow the tax base? Because it may or may not be realistic to think that X number of hundreds of millions of dollars in overrides or debt exclusions are going to be passed just sort of, okay, my taxes are X, I guess they'll be 1.3X or 1.2X or 1.6X. A lot of people, not everybody, as the assessors know, not everybody's taxes go up or down the same. But for a lot of people with less expensive houses, that's already happened. I mean, people's values have gone up dramatically. Other people who were lucky enough to own a $3 million house 10 years ago, still own a $3 million house. So, I think that discussion is as big as the one we're having here, and I don't know that there's room at the table for it. On the other hand, obviously, it's got to happen somewhere, sometime in direct coordination with what's going on here, or else the chances, because not only do people want to know what's next over 5 or 10 or 15 years, they want to know how and who is going to pay for it. And unless we tell them, here's the economic development plan, and these are the areas that we think have potential, and this is what we're going to do to bring forward that potential. These are the things we think we should be aggressive with. These are the things we don't think are important. Then that's another thing that's going to impact the ability of any of these things to happen. So I don't think we have forever to do it, but I don't know that this is right now is the group to do it.
Just picking up on an angle of that, because I think there were a couple, firstly, I think this was very nice, and thank you for the memo. There were a couple of prompts in here about fiscal capacity, about financial constraints.
Yes.
And so wanted to ask about how we might envision that those be defined and determined. relative to this project? And is that something that this group leans in on or not? So for instance, it talks about identifying funding approaches that align with the community's fiscal capacity. Good. Develop alternative scenarios that consider financial constraints. Also good in concept, but really how do we define that and how do we determine that ultimately? Is that something that, like, how does that get fed into this? Is that something where this group could lean into perhaps? It also links to financial policies, like, and how do the financial policies ultimately support what's coming out of this, is maybe where this group could lean into.
Yes, so I think some of that are technical questions this group could lean on me, Tim, Nora, to feed in as far as like a financial constraint, right? You can look at from an operating perspective of what's our ability to pay for bonds within the levy without doing debt exclusions that we could apply towards building projects with our existing approach to funding town, school operations, and shared costs, with what capacity could we have if we made perhaps some different decisions with certain long-term liabilities like OPEB, right? What could that bond capacity look like if we wanted to ask of the planning board and the Department of Planning and Community Engagement if, you know, to adopt a policy that X% of incremental new growth from certain areas goes to a capital fund? What if we adopted a policy that said certain amounts of earnings on investments the town has go into a capital stabilization fund to defray tax impacts? There's a lot of different ways to approach it. This is meant to be, and this actually goes back, Maya, to your question, this is going to be a qualifications-based, an RFP, not a strict lowest price proposal, which is why I didn't necessarily put it on this document, because some of this is also, we will learn a lot about the firms when they submit a response and a project approach on how they have done this in other communities and what they felt was valuable versus what wasn't. But I think some of that's asking the technical staff, some of that would be us leaning on you. Some of it is, you can't presume, but it's a general safe assumption that to the extent possible, folks want to pay the smallest tax increase possible, right? So how that automatically puts downward pressure on debt exclusions, but we know these are large projects. So I think there's a lot of existing information. It's a question of sifting through and prioritize what's the biggest impact. What bears the most fruit. We don't want to spend months of energy and consulting rates to pursue something that may be an interesting idea, maybe a small neighborhood redevelopment that would at most yield 100,000 in new growth, right? So I think that's going to be part of getting feedback from this group and for leaning on the expertise of a consultant of what's really going to be the largest area of opportunity to make a difference rather than things that are on the margin.
Yeah, if I can add to that a little bit, right? And I think that getting back to the original question around what, and I appreciate like Connor, you and I working together around this. The value add for me is that the Durham-Whittier report for both the schools and the municipal government identified, like, here are a list of challenges, here's some things we can do about it. I think the real value add here in colloquial terms is, how do we fund it in a way that the community can get behind? Right? And whether that is a level of new growth or whether that is a level of creative way of using existing resources in a way for like how and when we bond, how do we use reserves in a way, how do we look at other financial policies? I think those are all parts of the equation. But that's why it's so important to have that community input, is because of the idea is that we, you know, and I realize I'm speaking like far afield from my expertise level of expertise and locus of control as superintendent. But if the plan is we're going to develop this massive parcel of land that the community would never get behind, that's not a winning solution, right? That's why you need to engage the community in these conversations and say, what are ways that we can actually access the financial resources we have or can potentially build as a community to fund these things in a sequential way. And I think to the point about review, like I totally agree with Connor, like there should be a minimum, but with any of these plans, there are going to be decision points along the way. And those passive decision points, I think, will help inform where we go. And I can just talk about the Thurston project as an example. The decision of whether or not Thurston, if it goes forward, is a 6-8 project or a 5-3 project has an impact on the future of Sheehan and whether or not Sheehan is a part of that plan or not. So that's something that would certainly need to be reassessed at that point in time, right? And so it's not, if you wait until 3 years down the road because you've said you're doing it every 5 years, then you don't have the living, breathing document we need.
So is
Fully,
oh, sorry.
sorry, did I fully answer you have a question?
Yes, but it sounds like it's maybe a little bit TBD of how much framing around how much might it cost and how might we pay for it will be part of this effort versus either something that this group leans into or done in other places, it sounds like.
Yes, I think that's fair because we have the, I think, order of magnitude deficiency estimates for cost on some of the future needs, DPW, Carby Street, Town Hall, but we have a better idea with FS1 and Thurston, but everything else is quite far out. So even just trying to reverse engineer out a funding program, you want to have a stronger grip on forecasted costs of what these things could be depending on current per square foot trends and how far into the future. But I think that would be the goal here of this project, is try to put some amount of specificity on those items because we don't have it.
So just trying to understand the community engagement piece. Is the idea that we're gonna say to the community in these charrettes or these surveys or however we engage with them, you know, here are these projects that have been identified, here is the accompanying cost. What are you as a community willing to get behind in terms of a project? And then how are you as a community willing to fund it? Or is this more of this is what we think the priority should be, this is the order, how do you as a community want to fund it? It seems to me there's two parts of that question, and I'm not clear whether the consultant's deliverable is going to sort of put it out to the community to answer both, or going to sort of presuppose the first and get to the second.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know. That's, you know, one of those things that I think this team would want to discuss with the consultant. I think I generally don't think it is the role of staff and consultants to just kind of put everything out there on a normalized playing field without kind of doing the analysis on the front end and say, here's what we think these things cost and here's a couple of options of things that could make logical sense. Do you have a preference? Do you have major concerns? That is generally how I think those things are more constructive, because it's going to be extremely overwhelming, I think, if you just kind of mapped out, if you like take the most basic charrette of give everyone Post-its, right? If you just lined up on this whiteboard all the different buildings, how does somebody necessarily know to start if they're not like a super user of these buildings? So I would think, but again, if there's any major concern, we would talk about it with the consultant in this group. I think part of this is structuring and guiding the conversation without presupposing a defined outcome.
Yeah.
Right? We heard a really great example from an owner's project manager on Friday. We were interviewing firms for OPM for the new approach to FS1. And one of the questions everyone was asked was, have you ever been brought into a community that failed to achieve a debt exclusion to turn a project around and get it passed? And if so, how? And one of the examples that was given by one of the firms was that they were coming in from the outside, and there was well-intentioned notions held by the community leadership that a certain way of approaching a school project was, it had to be this way because the community would never support a tear down. There was too much sentimental attachment to these buildings. And this firm came in and with the support, obviously, the community leadership engaged in a lot of public polling that showed that that was just not true. That a large amount of the community was okay with that if it led to a more cost-effective project, which is the direction they then went, and the project was approved. So I think part of the value is bringing folks in from the outside who've done this in a lot of different communities, who can test and push us and kind of create a framework for us to go out to the public with, hey, we think these things make sense, but we don't purport to know everything. What are things you see about this that are of major concern while it's at this very early concept level stage, so we could try to incorporate that.
So I think part of the benefit of the school forums that you did, it was just great hearing people bring things up that I would not have thought of. So, and I sort of envision this process going the same way.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of folks in like meet and greets or office hours I've done have said, well, how does doing this cluster of buildings, if you do it as a consolidated project, right? So that's a great example. Do you do consolidated projects, or do you map out hey, every 5 years we're going to do this and this and this? There's pros and cons to each. It doesn't mean there's like a one right way to do it, but that is something that would be really valuable to hear directly from the residents of Westwood on if there is on the municipal side an effort to consolidate certain facilities to save spend in the long term, but it's going to cost more upfront. Where do people fall on that? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anyone here feels you know the answer and you feel strongly about it, and I'm not asking you to say it. But that's kind of the value I see from this. But again, I'm maybe not the newest member to Long Range, but I'm certainly the newest one to town. So if this committee feels that I'm putting the scope in a direction that's off of where your discussions of this have been, I you know, it won't hurt my feelings. You can let me know, but I do think I think we whether it's this or if the committee wants to say no, take another month, and you want to give some more specific feedback, we do have to get to work. That I feel really strongly about.
Connor, I can't help but wonder, consultants apply and they are interviewed, how they would answer, how do we get the public wanting to engage in this discussion? Recent examples show that the FS1 meetings are attended primarily by people who feel they may be impacted by site choices. To think about this stuff, it's very dense. And there's a lot of information that people just don't know, as you pointed out. People don't use a lot of the facilities. You know, they aren't familiar with it. Schools tend to be quite different because families are in the schools, kids have grown up through them. People may have gone to them when they grew up in town and now they're raising their family here. So it'd be really interesting to find out how these consultants go about getting people engaged to contribute to these discussions. I think it feels like a huge challenge.
It is, and if they're honest,
somebody who
they'll
can
tell you they don't have a silver bullet answer.
No, but they may have things they've
they'll probably
tried
have
that have
ideas
proven
and-
successful, or they test for the community or whatever. It's just, you know, people are so busy and overwhelmed with all their life responsibilities that, you know, we've all agreed to step forward and be on this committee to invest more time. So I think part of the question is how can we help in that process? You know, maybe they, in part, draw things out of us and make us think about them differently. You know, we're part of that community discussion. We shouldn't be removed from it. You know, we, for the most part, have more knowledge than many, except for the user groups who are actually in facilities, or Jimmy McCarthy, who has to do so many things in buildings and says, you know, Houston, we have a problem. But that, yeah, I'm just struck by how big this task will be for a consultant to administer.
Yes. it will be.
You know, we should challenge them.
which
I don't
was-
know who's
which
gonna
was
be
really-
interviewing them, but we should really challenge them to
Yes.
give us examples or how they go about doing it.
Which I suppose to tie back to that was what was my impetus for wanting to do this, and to bring some paid support on, because it's a very important challenge, and all of those same challenges would be true if we were doing it sans.
Is Metropolitan Area Planning Council the type of consultant you would think of for something like this, or who?
No, not necessarily. So regional planning agencies can be, I'm not like categorically saying they couldn't
No.
submit interest, but they're typically more involved in land use policy, transportation policy, environmental policy. Those things are really important. Like, again, I don't know who would bid. But I would really think I would want to see a firm that has significant experience in assisting with complex infrastructure and capital planning, long-term planning for communities.
Yeah.
Perhaps MAPC has provided that kind of technical assistance. I don't know.
I think there are firms out there. We used a firm for our 2020 comprehensive plan that was simply helping us with the public engagement, not writing the plan for us.
Sure.
We had a steering committee. Phil, you were on that committee, that individuals wrote different parts of the plan. but we had a consulting firm that came in to help us with the public outreach, and I think that was very successful. And I think we'll probably hear from any of the firms that make proposals that most of them today will go to where the people are,
Right.
rather than expect them to come to
a meeting
us.
like this. Right.
Okay. Could I just get back to Nancy Hyde, your first comment about the commercial development and how this board was looking to take on a role there? While I understand that there would be a reason to kind of sit back and wait for this study to be done, in your efforts related to capital planning, I don't think that's the case with commercial development. I don't think there's time to wait. I think it happens regularly and consistently, and all of our opportunities come up one day and are gone the next. So I think that's something that doesn't stop and rolls forward, not necessarily on your schedule, but to the extent that you're available to weigh in on that and discuss options, whether it's a rezoning option or, there is some low-hanging fruit out there that we can pursue. I don't think there's an opportunity to wait on that. I think that's something that has to continuously move along.
And to piggyback on that, I think in the interest of community buy-in, I think we do need to be talking about that. If we're even considering proposing rezoning certain areas, we need to be really upfront about that, because we can talk about it until we're all purple. If people are not going to vote in favor of it, then it's wasted time. So I think we need to get a sense of what, like what Tim said, I would apply that to this as well, what the community is willing to accept as a solution and what they're not. Because I think that will really steer how we approach proposing zoning changes. I agree there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and I think that conversation is really valuable to have. That wouldn't necessarily disrupt neighborhoods and people that we could leverage already. But yeah, I think that from my perspective, if we're going to be talking about growing the commercial tax base in ways that could affect abutters or neighborhoods or change zoning or change it all, change is a topic that when it comes up, I think we need to be really transparent about it and really get a sense of what the community is willing to move forward with and what they're not. Because that will definitely impact what we can and can't do as far as that goes. So I agree, we shouldn't sit on that.
And that's the value that this committee can bring, to discuss the options, to discuss the need. I think that's what people really need to hear, that the need is significant and immediate, and then to discuss the ways that we meet that need. And I don't think that has to wait for this study to go forward.
So we could cover that, right, in some level of detail at the next meeting,
That'd be great.
I think in May. Okay.
And I think tying the two together is, I mean, everybody's against everything unless there's a reason to be for it. I mean, this is New England. So,
Profound film.
where I'm happy to say I've lived my whole life. But if somebody says, well, that's kind of inconvenient, what's the traffic going to be at that stop sign now if we have X, Y, Z
Sure.
on those 6 acres of land? But then, 3 days later, they're at a meeting talking about the $35 million override for X or the $200 million override for Y, and they're not putting those two conversations together.
I don't think the population puts those conversations together.
Right. And maybe that's something we can do, so that there's not just the poor planning board, trying to find a way to swim forward on these things, but that, yes, and if these 4 projects go forward and these areas are rezoned and they have the potential of, instead of your tax bill going up on average, $750 a year, it's going to go up $350 a year. Then maybe people don't mind waiting an extra 30 seconds at the stop sign.
I actually have a slightly different take on that. I think what I have observed, and I'm just speaking for myself, people are not afraid to say no. If they don't want a zoning change, they're not afraid to say no to the zoning change, and if that means a project doesn't move forward, they're fine with that. So that's why I think people do make those connections, and they're okay saying, we're not going to do that because we don't want the impact, so we're okay with a municipal or school project not moving forward. And I think that's something that everyone in town needs to really keep in mind is I think we need to be sensitive to that I've noticed people are not afraid to say no to things, which is fine. I mean, that's where people are. They have the right to say no. But I think that guides me as far as how I'm going to approach people if I'm coming forward saying, hey, we're thinking about rezoning a property and it's going to bring in a ton of money, but here's the realistic impacts. And trying to get buy-in is going to be important, and being really honest about it, and really, from my perspective, really understanding people's concerns. And if it's a deal breaker, then I think we need to think, if people are not on board, then we need to take that seriously and not just assume people will change their minds, and figure out a way to be realistic in our approach. That's just.
Can I make sure, I'm not trying to be obtuse, so are you applying that broadly to the discussion around leaning in on commercial development, or specifically about this, like, strategic plan for capital needs?
Commercial development in
Okay.
general. If we're talking about, hey, here's a property that's underutilized and we want to rezone it to include X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
There's going to be conversations around that. And if people are really strongly pushing back, I think we need to figure out if we really feel, if parts of the community feel it's really important that zoning change happen, then we need to figure out a way to have those conversations and not just assume people will change their minds because it's necessary to finance something.
Sure.
I think we've seen that's not necessarily true. And I don't have the answer to that. That's just something I've observed in my however many years on the planning board, that people are not, they're not moved by the fact that this, if you say no to this, it may cause a project to not move forward. So we need to figure out how to meet people where they are, I guess it's a very long way of me trying to say, we really need to be cognizant of how to meet people where they are, because I don't think we're gonna get people to move forward on some things like that. Particularly rezoning is like a hot button, and I get it. You know, when I think of, if someone's gonna put something across the street from me, I think about how I would react to that. So, but I think we have to really think about how to meet people where they are before we can realistically have conversations to maybe move them in a different direction, if that's gonna happen at all. But I don't think it's necessarily that people aren't connecting the two. I think there are some people that don't connect if we rezone this, we'll be able to fund this. I think I've heard from a lot of people who absolutely understand that, they still don't wanna do it. So just being realistic.
Sure.
But I don't know that there's anything in town that's undeveloped that's that significant that could entirely fund.
Not entirely. Yeah, I think, I don't think we're gonna see another university station.
Right. That's kind of what I was alluding to.
But even some of our, what would be smaller than that parcels that are still larger than some other parcels, there's been conversations around them, and they can be very sensitive subjects, so.
But the other part of that coin is whenever you walk out of a town meeting and there's a discussion about something that costs something, it's like, well, why don't we have more commercial development? It's not necessarily the same people. They may be, but I think people are looking through both ends of that looking glass, and I don't know, if 63% are looking one way and 37% the other, or vice versa, but a lot of people say, well, yeah, we should be able to do that, but why isn't XYZ happening across the street from Wegmans or whatever, wherever they think there should be development
Right.
or, higher use of facilities or properties or whatever. So I think, everybody starts at a different point sort of on the circle. And so you've sort of got to, I think the best thing we could do as a whole is to just tie the things together, and that means that realistically, instead of X dollars for a fire station, maybe it's 0.6X, because we're doing these things with policies and doing these things with economic development, and some people are still going to vote against it if it's 0.6, and other people are going to vote against it whether it's 0.6 or 1.6. So everything's sort of incremental. There's no magic bullet here. It's just, I think if we have a robust discussions and can provide information and facts, because everybody's got their own set of facts these days. If we have a set of facts that people can hopefully have some confidence in, maybe that helps some of these decisions get made in a more rational way.
Agreed. And I think commercial development, and I'm putting that in quotes not to be flip, but because it's a term that means different things to different people. So I think it's really important to have those conversations now to get a sense, like Tim said, of what types of commercial development would the community, with a capital C, accept? What can we move forward in a realistic way? So I think it's really important to have those conversations. And I agree, tie them together. If we do X, then we can afford Y a little bit easier. It's not gonna pay for all of it, but
Right.
it'll offset. But I think we need to hear what people are willing to accept before we start saying, hey, we could do X, Y, and Z. Or we can propose, but it definitely needs to be a conversation, from my perspective.
I think that ties back to Maya's question around what's the approach to having constructive conversations with the consultant or the community is you actually have a lot of existing adopted strategic plans, right? You have a comprehensive plan. You have a housing production plan. You have a facilities needs assessment plan. I'm sure the schools have a strategic plan. So I would envision that part of this person or firm's job would be to, when we're having some workshops with people, is to anchor them around the existing strategic documents that have been adopted by citizens of this community, so that it's not just this kind of free form, because it's too expansive and overwhelming. But yeah, I mean, I think trying to, yes, I think there are people in every community who do actually fully appreciate a vote here leads to this downstream, and I'm okay with that. I do think this is a good opportunity for all of us as we travel through the next few years, having to make some hard decisions on facilities and operating budgets, to hopefully have a process where there are residents of Westwood coming in and we're having a conversation of, okay, in a vacuum, maybe more commercial development and traffic is unappealing. If that could lessen the burden of a debt exclusion, do you still feel the same way? Right? Because again, it's not my place to know how everyone feels about that. So I suppose Phil and Nancy as chairs, I would look to you on, I don't know if you want folks to take a vote. I do not want to proceed unless people feel confident in the scope. And if you don't, I'd like to know, because I don't want to be here in fall and have reservations that you have. And if you would prefer, I mean, I'm happy to wait. And if people have particular things you'd like to send to me by the end of the week for me to review, and Tim and I could take a look and maybe adjust it, I'm happy to do that. But I want to be useful to this group. This is not a vanity project for me. So if there's changes or reservations, I'd like to make sure I'm not reading between lines.
So what other questions? Like, does everyone,
Well, I'm trying, this is a dense document and it's very well done. So I'm going to ask you, so I don't get buried in it or lost in it. Does it say anything about coordination with this committee? Because
Yes.
that's, okay. So I think that's essential, that, we have that connective tissue with them. And otherwise, I would say this is very comprehensive. Go for it. That's mine.
Yeah,
I think we
read
should
through
go
that.
forward.
I didn't have any issues. I thought you did a really nice job and covered the base. So.
I too support it. I like the idea of when you're interviewing the consultants to kind of probe on the financial modeling, for lack of that's not quite the right term, but how do we consider financial constraints or financial capacity in context of this? Obviously, you don't ignore it, but how do you put some parameters around that are useful to the effort?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Maya, Tim, any
I think
thoughts, questions?
the only thing that we might want to add to this is, to Nancy's point, something in here about really trying to get robust community engagement. I don't see that in here, and I think that could be a key component. I know, Connor, it's very difficult, as you mentioned, it's very difficult for consultants to do that, particularly if they don't know the community. But let's at least put it in here as part of the deliverables, that they come up with some plan to expand outreach, to get people in the doors.
Isn't that in the area under community engagement, public forum facilitation? The town expects the selected consultant to support the design of a structured community engagement process.
Yeah, but when I think about the
Yeah.
Pine Hill project, they supported us, right? They were providing materials, but they weren't really doing as much guiding us on how to get out to the community, how to bring people in the door.
So you're saying to be advising us before you reach the forum on, here's actually a better way to do the forum
Yeah,
itself.
or even just here, and, you know, they have been in tons of communities, right? They've been presenting materials to lots of people. They should have some ideas of what were some effective tools to get people engaged. That is the deliverable, I think, I
Yeah.
don't see in here.
I think the other part of that too, right, that can probably be addressed through the evaluation rubric for the RFP as
Yes,
well
and
too,
the-
right? In
and the
terms of like
comparative
when the
criteria.
firms are interviewed, like
Yeah,
how
as
well
long
they
as they
present that.
understand
Yeah.
it's part of their scope.
It
Then
it does say development of a public engagement strategy and schedule in coordination with town and school leadership.
But I
What,
think,
what more would you want it to say
I think you
to
could,
address your point?
you could through the RFP say, provide concrete examples of successful engagement strategies you've leveraged in other communities.
Yeah,
Is
and
that-
I don't see
That makes
that
sense?
in the deliverables themselves. Right, I think that's the facilitation piece in the scope. I just don't see it in the actual deliverables. I see the strategic capital improvement plan. I see reports suitable for public distribution and presentation. So
So we can reiterate it there.
that's where I think we might want to add it.
And I think this can be absolutely modified even after tonight. I think the purpose for tonight's discussion is to see, does this make sense, or are we all in agreement about moving forward with this approach?
That's a good
I
point.
think
Yeah.
it's great. I don't think this group could have done it without this, so
Yeah.
thank you for bringing it.
But you want to take this, right, and go soon?
Yeah, so to be clear, procurement's gonna
Right,
We need to
make it a
write
little bit, make it a little tighter
Right.
and,
Right.
We need
and
to write an RFP.
Right.
And Michelle Miller is very good at that.
yep.
to
With guidance.
So this was meant to be kind of a vision level scope of work, and yes, Michelle's knows that in addition to the 40 other projects that we're doing, that this is on the list, that to take this and tighten it up from a technical perspective.
But we're
But-
not meeting again to go through this again, right? This is, we're gonna go to procurement now,
It's a
correct?
honeybee.
It's a
It's
bumble.
a bumblebee.
It's a bumble, so it won't sting
I
anybody.
believe it's a
Sorry.
bird.
So yes, I mean I'm happy to
Drone.
take a member or two of this committee and put it, if anyone wants to volunteer to be on the selection committee, I'm happy to bring you, as long as it's not a quorum, although it's a selection committee, it's an open meeting, but
I'd be happy to.
Phil, Nancy,
this
do,
looks- yeah,
I don't
otherwise I
know
think
if you
this looks
want
great.
to pull the group, but I'm happy to bring a member with me.
I'm happy to have Nancy represent us.
Thanks, Phil.
Good
Which,
to
Nancy,
work with you
hi.
again.
No, Nancy already volunteered, so.
Okay,
Miss
there you
Nancy, right?
Yeah, she did,
Yeah.
and that's great. Thank you, Nancy.
There you
And
go.
I'll bring our mascot, the most overweight honeybee in Westwood.
I don't
Poor
know.
thing just wants to.
How to get in here
just
is
wants to get out.
really interesting.
I've never seen it be that big.
Phil
no, so
actually
that's-
thinks it's a drone.
That's, so point well taken on the RFP will include, how have you operationalized and conceptualized what financial constraints are, right? What are some specific ways you've looked at that? And then also what are specific tools you have used, right? Getting down to, do you do surveys? Do you do social media? Do you go to farmers markets? Like what has actually been constructive? We could do that.
I'm now obsessed with this.
Okay.
Any
Well,
other
Would you,
questions?
so would you sort of, like a vote of support of,
I'm comfortable with your
Something with it.
consensus.
Consensus can work, yeah. I haven't heard anybody say, don't do it. This is
Right.
the wrong approach.
so maybe Nancy and I will make a statement that it appears that the committee supports this and look forward to seeing, you move forward with the final version,
Great.
incorporating the discussion today, something like that.
Thank you. Thank you all for the feedback. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting this together. This is
Looks great.
Yes.
And Nora and I can get on the agenda for the next meeting to talk about
Absolutely.
our commercial,
Yes.
residential?
Yep, we thought that this
Property
was
tax
going to be
split.
a lot for tonight.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but no, definitely for May. If we can take a look at, everyone has some calendars in front. I'm sorry? Oh, okay.
We don't have the calendars yet. She didn't want us to get distracted.
I know, right?
And I do mine on
Oh, just you and I have it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that might be 2.
Thank you.
I'll pass it down.
So this has like every committee meeting coming up for the next
Got
few
one.
months. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
The select board ones are tentative on there, so it was my thing. This is the best information.
Well, boy, weren't we lucky to find a Monday night, huh?
We really were.
Doesn't look as though there's too many of those available.
So what's
Does it make sense
everyone's,
to not pick a Monday or a Tuesday?
you don't want to pick a Monday or Tuesday?
Well,
Well, just looking at how,
the 18th of May.
That's
you-
what,
you
actually, I was
have-
looking at that date.
That's an A, so FS1 AM means morning meeting, so. Maybe,
So we can meet in the evening, or 6 o'clock.
or on Tuesday, the 26th, but then that's after Memorial Day, maybe people are trying to actually enjoy summer, I don't know.
What does everyone think about the 18th? Because I would like to get the economic development conversation happening sooner rather than later.
I can't make that, but if it works for everyone else, they should do it. Nancy, I don't know, it's the 8th grade chorus concert. I don't know if Caroline's in chorus.
She's not.
Okay.
I was like, I had this look of horror, like, oh no, no date I missed.
Works for me.
Okay.
that's fine by me.
Yeah, that seems fine.
Everyone else okay with the 18th?
Yeah. That's good. That works. Sorry.
6 o'clock?
Evening? Evening, good. I like 6 PM, better than 7 if we can.
Okay, and then I think for June, it might make sense to hold off on June at this point until we know more about the consultant. What do you think, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that as the RFP gets developed, there'd be a timeline for the selection criteria, right, which would identify when, and that would probably dictate, I would think, when the next long-range
next
meeting would be. Does that make sense to you, Connor?
Yes, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fine with that,
So we can hold
provided
off
you're
on-
all reasonably available for doodle polls to put a meeting together.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, as long as we have May scheduled, I want to make sure we got the next one on the calendar.
Can we,
Okay.
do we know if there are any members of the committee who are doing this by Zoom? Or is this not,
No,
it's not available?
not available.
Okay.
It could be by then, because the library, the meeting room will be outfitted.
Full
For a
disclosure,
hybrid.
I went to the library tonight thinking it was there. And they are working.
How was
hard.
that meeting, Pat?
It was quicker than this one. But they are working diligently in the large room now.
Yeah, that should be done by the end of April.
What are they doing in it?
They're making the large meeting room hybrid capable,
Oh,
so you can
Got
do
it.
Zoom and hybrid meetings.
I pulled what we used to call a Shapiro and went to the wrong meeting room.
Oh, which is why you were late, which is the
Yes.
other half of the Shapiro method?
I was early, Pat.
Okay, so on to meeting minutes. If you don't mind.
You're just gonna do a quick approval of the past 2 meeting minutes. So for the minutes from January 12th, they're all in the packet and they were emailed out earlier. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a
Second, second.
Great. And then you can just say, all in favor, say aye.
Now, is this a Zoom meeting?
No,
No.
It's being recorded though, right?
so it's not Zoom.
Okay, you can do that.
All opposed, say nay. Anyone abstaining?
I'll abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. And then for the meetings from February 13th, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. And anyone abstaining?
Abstaining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
That's easy.
Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I didn't think so.
Never
Thank you so
had-
much, everyone.
in all of the-
I
in all of
know.
the thousands of meetings I've been to, I've